the Zephyrian War Council convened in the crystalline chambers of their flagship, the Void Ripper. Admiral Krickstar flexed his six-fingered hands as holographic displays showed the smoldering remains of New Geneva colony. The human settlement had been reduced to ash and twisted metal in mere hours, their first successful strike against the expanding human empire. The primitive mammals offered less resistance than anticipated, Krickstar's tactical officer, Vexlon, reported with satisfaction. Their energy shields collapsed after the initial plasma bombardment. The colony's population of 50,000 has been eliminated. The Admiral's chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's bioluminescent panels. For 3 centuries, the Zephyrian hegemony had dominated this sector of the galaxy. The arrival of these soft-bodied humans, with their crude technology, had initially seemed like nothing more than an irritating expansion into Zephyrian territory. New Geneva had been chosen as an example, a demonstration of what happened to species that dared challenge their supremacy. Excellent, Krickstar clicked in approval. Prepare the Warcasters to broadcast our victory across human space. Let them know the price of trespassing in our domain. But even as the Admiral spoke, something nagged at his tactical instincts. The humans had fought with a desperation that seemed almost calculated. Their final transmissions hadn't been pleas for mercy or surrender, but rather cryptic messages about Phase 1 being complete. 3 solar cycles later, the first reports began filtering in. Human ships' vessels that shouldn't have existed, according to Zephyrian intelligence, were appearing at the edges of hegemony space. These weren't the clunky exploration crafts or mining vessels they'd observed before. These were sleek, predatory things that moved with impossible speed and precision. Commander Thexara, of the border patrol vessel Searing Talon, was the first to encounter them. Her routine patrol of the Exerion system was interrupted by proximity alarms that shouldn't have been possible. Something had appeared within their sensor grid without being detected approaching. Unknown vessel, you have entered Zephyrian territory, she transmitted on standard frequencies. Identify yourself or be destroyed. The response came not in words, but in action. The human ship, barely 1/3 the size of the Searing Talon, opened fire with weapons that defied everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about human technology. Beams of coherent energy that seemed to bend space itself struck the Zephyrian vessel's shields, not just penetrating them, but turning their own defensive energy against the ship's hull. Thexara watched in horror as her proud warship's armor began to dissolve, as if the very atoms were being convinced to abandon their molecular bonds. The human vessel disappeared as suddenly as it had arrived, leaving the Searing Talon drifting powerless, its crew barely alive in emergency life support pods. When news reached Admiral Krickstar, he dismissed it as exaggeration born of shock and defeat. But the reports kept coming. Human strike forces were hitting Zephyrian outposts with surgical precision, using technology that seemed generations ahead of what intelligence had suggested. Worse, they weren't just destroying military targets, they were capturing them, studying them, learning. Dr. Sylvia Chen stood in the observation deck of the UES Retribution, watching as another Zephyrian base fell to their advanced assault teams. Her colleagues in Earth Strategic Command had called her radical when she'd proposed the New Geneva Protocol 3 years ago. The plan had been simple in its brutality. Sacrifice a colony to learn everything possible about Zephyrian technology and tactics, then strike back with overwhelming technological superiority. The quantum resonance analysis from their destroyed ships has given us everything we need, she reported to Admiral Morrison via quantum entanglement communicator. Their propulsion systems, their weapons, their shield technology, all of it based on principles we've now reverse-engineered and improved upon. The sacrifice of New Geneva had been horrific, but it had served its purpose. Every moment of the attack had been recorded by hidden sensors, every energy signature analyzed, every tactical decision catalogued. The colony's residents had volunteered for the mission, knowing they were buying humanity time and knowledge with their lives. Now, 6 months after New Geneva's fall, human forces were pushing deep into Zephyrian space with ships that incorporated stolen alien technology merged with human innovation. The Zephyrians' own weapons had been turned against them, refined and perfected by human engineers who thought in ways the rigid hegemony military doctrine couldn't anticipate. Admiral Crickstar found himself retreating toward the hegemony core worlds, his once mighty fleet reduced to a fraction of its original strength. The humans fought with a viciousness that seemed to violate every rule of civilized warfare. They didn't just defeat Zephyrian forces, they hunted them, cornered them, and systematically dismantled everything the hegemony had built over centuries. How is this possible? Crickstar demanded of his science council. Our intelligence indicated they were barely capable of interstellar flight. Senior researcher Quindal's translation matrix conveyed deep unease. Admiral, we have underestimated a fundamental aspect of human psychology. They do not think like us. Where we see the destruction of New Geneva as a victory that should have intimidated them into submission, they saw it as a learning opportunity. They sacrificed their own people to study us, to prepare for a war we didn't even realize we were starting. The final battle came at Zephyr Prime itself, the hegemony's capital world. Crickstar's remaining forces made their last stand in the planet's orbital defense grid, but it was too late. Human ships materialized from what the Zephyrians now knew was some form of dimensional fold technology, another innovation born from studying captured hegemony vessels. As the Void Ripper burned around him, Admiral Crickstar finally understood the true cost of underestimating humanity. They hadn't just struck back, they had evolved in the space of months into something far more dangerous than the hegemony had ever been. The annihilation of New Geneva hadn't been their victory. It had been humanity's calculated first move in a war the Zephyrians never saw coming. The last transmission from Zephyr Prime was a simple message broadcast on all frequencies. Earth remembers New Geneva.